a lot of people don't know our history, like of how we met or how we ended up doing what we're doing in life today. And so that was actually something that some people asked about. So I think we should go ahead and tell people.
Okay.
Give them a little overview of like, I think it even just helps people understand who the heck we are.
Okay.
And so I would love to hear from your perspective.
Okay.
You go ahead and talk about the day we met,
Okay.
how we met. Actually, quick question. I think I know the answer to this. Before we actually ever met, so I knew who Greg was, and we can like come back to that. But do you ever recall seeing me before the day we met?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so. Okay, go
I
ahead.
did not. Yeah, so we were in college. I was going into my last semester of college, and you were going into, I think, your sophomore year of college, right? And I was working at a summer camp, which is kind of where, I grew up in Akron, you grew up in Findlay, so opposite sides of the state, but we would do these summer camps. And so they would kind of put me at the entrance of the camp to like welcome students in, high-fiving them, have them get out of their 15-passenger van and
Make him run
push
around,
it.
do push-ups.
Yeah.
You definitely had like the biggest energy, so it was like, put that guy at the front.
Yeah. So anyway, I was just doing that, and I was totally immersed in what I was doing, just excited for the week and wanting to make it a great week for everybody. And so you somehow had slipped past me and dropped the students from your church off, and then we're getting ready to leave. And so you and my friend Tony were leaving, and he kind of rolled down his window and just yelled out like, "Hi." And so if I had just waved at him, he'd have driven off, and you would have driven right out of my life. I never would have seen you. But for whatever reason, I was like, kind of say, "Hey, wait a second." And I ran over there just to, dap him up. And I get over to him, and I look past. I can still see it like it was yesterday, like in the van. I remember what you guys were facing left. I look right past him, and I see you, and it stunned me, honestly. I'm telling the truth. Like,
Do you remember what I was wearing by chance?
I remember, I believe you were wearing a white T-shirt, if I remember correctly, like a T-shirt. And I just remember,
T-shirt,
I just remember seeing
flip flops. That's my summer staples.
Yeah, I remember just seeing your face first, and just being stunned, like, what in the world? And like a lot of thoughts were in my head in terms of like, who is that? And then even like, why is she riding with Tony? Because I knew Tony was married to not you. I'm like, that's not his wife. Which is fine. But I was just like, who is that, right? And so, and then I was like, hey, I kind of introduced myself, and I realized I was like staring at you, and I kind of caught myself. But honestly, what I thought, like in the very short conversation, because we didn't go into anything deep or whatever, but you obviously like carried yourself really well, like really sharp and just absolutely beautiful. And I remember having the conscious thought, who marries these women? like what do you have to do? Like, I don't understand, like, because these women fall in love and they marry people. And like, what is it? Like, what do you have to do? Like, do you have to be funny? Do you have to be wealthy? Do you have to be, I don't even know. Like, I was like, literally like, how does that even happen? And then, you guys drove away. We just had a basic conversation. And I remember thinking, like, at the end of the week, if Tony comes back, I'm going to ask more questions. Like, I'm going to try to figure out who this is. And he did. And I caught him, and I was like, hey, man, who was that? Who was that woman, with you? And he's like, oh, that's Shaylyn. Ha, 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 ha. You have no chance.
Just so mean.
No, I mean, he just came right out. Like, I mean,
so
I thought he was my friend. I thought he'd be like, yeah, you guys would make a great couple. No, he was like, you have no shot. He's like, she was like a finalist, Miss Ohio, blah, blah, blah. I think she likes this other guy, da, 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 like was going into all this. And then he started talking real loud. He was like, hey, Greg wants to meet Shaylyn Hot. All these people. I'm like, yo, relax. Like, I wasn't trying to have this big public spectacle. And so I was like, hey, man, why don't you just let her know I'd like to meet her, And he's like, No. Again, time frame. There was no cell. I mean, I didn't have a cell phone.
Yeah,
there was no
say
texting.
there were no cell phones, but it was
No,
pretty
very
rare.
rare.
Like,
Very rare.
Not everybody you knew had one.
That's right.
Smartphones weren't a thing.
I
It
didn't
was
have
flip
one.
phone.
You didn't have
Yeah.
one. There was no social media. There was no way to track you down.
I don't think MySpace was even a thing yet.
There was no
it? It was like-
MySpace. There was none of that.
Yeah.
So, I was kind of at his mercy, and he basically told me no. So I was like, fine, I guess, whatever. But
What you didn't know, you thought he was your friend. Really, he was a better friend to me because he did immediately call me.
Yeah.
He did have cell phones.
we don't talk anymore.
He immediately called me. So he and I worked together at the time. We both worked together at a church. And he had been my youth pastor when I was growing up. So I think he was feeling a lot more loyal to me than he was to you.
Way more loyal.
So he called me immediately on the way home and was like, hey, Greg Ford was asking about you. Like, are you interested at all? He's like, he wasn't going to put my business out there for me. So I'm like, yeah, definitely. What's interesting for me, if we backtrack that story a little bit from my perspective, is I knew who you were before we met. So because you're a little bit older than I was, am. I didn't catch up. I feel
we've
like
been
I did.
aging at different speeds.
So clearly my math is not mathing. But because you're older than I am, you had started working at the camp when I was still a camper at the camp, like my senior year. And so I actually loathed you because
That's
you
how
and I
every
both,
great marriage starts.
It is. Well, it's impressive if you can turn it around the way that you did. This says a lot about you. So you were the bane of my existence in certain ways because you were too good looking and you were too competitive. No, listen, hear me out. And you were distracting. So you and I are both very competitive people. We don't play board games. It's bad for our marriage. We don't do it. But when you were a camp leader and I was a camper, we were on opposite teams and you were leading your team and you're like, warrior energy, you guys are winning a bunch of games. I mean, I would say you also cheated some, but that's neither here nor there.
It's not a foul unless the ref blows a whistle.
It's not cheating unless you get caught,
That's
yes.
right.
And so I am much more of a stickler for the rules, but also I'm equally competitive. And I would get so mad at all the other girls on my team, as well as some of the leaders on our team, because they were all completely infatuated with you. And I was like, ladies, I need you to stay laser focused on winning. You are completely being blinded by this man. Like, I need your blinders on. I need you to not see him. He doesn't exist. He's the enemy. We hate him. And I couldn't convince people. And so not only were you winning on the field, but you were winning with mind games as well with my team, unintentionally. You weren't a flirt or anything. You didn't have to. Just your presence was like, it was enough. And it was really frustrating for someone like me who was like, I don't care. I want to win. I would like to take him down. So, and then it was just kind of funny because I had friends that were like such huge friends of you or fans of you. They literally had pictures of you in their locker. Like it was a whole thing, So for me, I was like, this guy, I got to take him down, man. And so that was my framework for you. So then when I actually met you that day in the van.
So this whole marriage has been a diabolical plan for you to get even.
The long game,
for you to destroy my life.
How's it going? That's so terrible. No, I did not do that. But that would be a story.
That'd be an epic movie.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah.
Maybe I won't reveal the true plan to you until we're 80, and I'll be like,
it's all making
here's
sense.
How it unfolded. So, anyways, I think for me, I saw you whatever the opposite of rose-colored glasses is. I saw you through those mud-colored glasses. I don't know.
Okay.
And so when I saw you that day that you came over to the car to talk to Tony, I was like, oh, he's actually cuter than I remembered because I wasn't competing with you. And so now I was like, gosh, he's really attractive. And then you said a couple things and I was like, and he's kind of funny, So you were opening me back up to being like, okay, I guess I'm allowed to see what everyone else sees. It's okay. So you started winning me over at that moment. So when I kind of I got to be honest, I don't like admitting this publicly, but I kind of was, thinking about you the whole week after I saw
Really?
you at the beginning of the week. Yeah.
Okay.
I try to play it cool,
Okay.
but I wasn't that cool. I was like, man, you kind of just kept coming to mind. So then when he called me on the way home from picking the kids up and said that you asked about me, I was like, well, okay. I kind of liked that.
Well, what's messed up is he waited like a week
To tell you.
to call me.
Yeah. Yeah, that was not
and
very
say,
nice.
hey, remember that conversation we had
Yeah.
a week ago? I mean, he could have called me that day and said, hey, we talked and she's willing to meet you.
Yeah. He's
waited
the
like a
one that
week. I was
really played it cool.
Man, that was messed up. I was like moving on. I was like, hey, I guess
Yeah.
he's probably right. She probably is too good for me, and that's fine. And so
Okay.
I'll just move on. So I went back to work, dude. I was like, and then he calls me out of the blue, and he's like, hey, she said.
Where were you working at the time?
I was roofing houses,
In?
Akron.
Oh, you were still in Akron.
Well, actually, yeah.
Yeah, you
I
were
was
still
in
in
Akron,
Akron.
but I was getting ready to go down to Mississippi and
Yeah.
trim houses.
Yeah.
Hang doors.
Yeah.
I hung more crooked doors in Mississippi than you can possibly imagine.
If you live in Mississippi,
I apologize.
you may be entitled
if you
to
have a dime a
compensation.
home in Mississippi and your door doesn't close properly, I am to blame. But yeah, that's he waited, all that time, and so
Yeah.
I don't know why he felt a need to do that, but whatever. I'm glad he eventually called.
Yeah. So then the next time we meet up is at a conference in Washington, D.C., which was probably just a few weeks later? Month later?
Yeah, it was
Probably about a
yeah.
month.
Yeah. Yep.
And we meet up there. Again, no cell phones.
I was calling you from payphone. I was calling Tony's cell phone from a payphone with a phone card. Like, where do we meet?
sound really
There's no
old.
text. There's no hey, I'm around the corner. Hey, I'm going to send you my location.
Right, yeah. No,
There's none of that.
No, none of those things.
Would have been nice.
Would have been.
But
But
anyway.
we did find each other.
Yeah.
And then once we did, it was basically the entire rest of the time that we were there. We were pretty much inseparable.
Yeah.
I mean, we had our first date, went to Hard Rock Cafe in DC. Here's one of the other moments for me that I was like, I really like this guy. And I think most people would probably, I don't know, maybe this would seem like a weird one. But we were sitting there eating lunch, dinner, whatever it was, at Hard Rock. And you had finished your food, and I had eaten about half of mine. You know where I'm going. And after a few minutes of talking, you interrupted, or I think it was just a lull in the conversation, and you said, are you going to finish that? And I was like, no, do you want it? And you're like, yeah, absolutely. So I slid my food over, and I was like, okay, now I know that this guy is being real in this moment and not trying to, when I say not trying to impress me, I don't mean like you weren't impressive or that, you know what I mean, like that you were just being real.
Yeah.
And that you weren't putting on some facade. You were just like, I mean, this is who I am. You either like it or you don't.
Well, I remember, it was one of those things where they bring the food out and the other person's food looks better than yours.
That's the worst.
Yeah. And so I was like, well, it's all good. And I didn't say anything, but I'm a pretty fast eater.
You are.
So
I have had to speed up considerably over there.
So I put my food down, and you were slow eating yours. And you hadn't touched it for a few minutes. And I was still kind of hungry, and your food looked good. And so I literally thought about it because I was like, okay, if I ask her to eat off of
First
her
date,
plate.
that's a risk.
Yes, exactly. But then I thought, you know what? Let's just be honest about who we are,
Exactly.
And if we're still together in 6 months, I'm gonna
be eating off my
I'm
plate
gonna be
anyway.
asking, are you gonna finish that? And so I kind of went for it.
Yeah. And that was what I liked about it, was just like, all right, this guy, like, no pretense is probably the better way to say it. Like, you weren't being pretentious in any way. It was just kind of like, yeah, I mean, here I am, and if you like it, you like it. If you don't, like, no hard feelings. We'll go our separate ways, whatever. And so that whole weekend, we just had a great time talking and awesome time hanging out. I actually, remember I went back to my room and called my mom and was like, basically said, this is the guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not that person. I'm not a fast mover.
You played it super cool because I put my cards absolutely on the table. So like literally the first night, because we're doing this dialogue right now, right? We're having a conversation, but we had a nonstop conversation from pretty much the moment we met to 1 a.m. or whatever.
Yeah.
It was like I don't even know what time we met up, probably 10 o'clock in the morning or something.
Yeah.
Went all
From like
throughout
10
the
a.m.
subway, went all through the, the different monuments and things in DC, and it was just an easy nonstop conversation. And it just seamlessly went from like small talk to like really deep stuff. Like we talked about a lot of things about our values and our, things that our aspirations and our future. And I mean, it was so easy. It was so natural. It wasn't forced at all. I remember thinking like, man, this is amazing. And like, honestly, by the end of that night, I was like, what else would I be looking for? Like, this is everything, that in a person that I was looking for. And so I put the cards on the table. I was like, look, if I'm going to miss on this, it's not going to be for lack of clarity. So I said point
A problem
blank,
undefined is undefeated.
yeah,
That's what Greg Ford
I'm
says.
thinking if I'm going to lose, like I'm going out swinging, So I was very direct. I was like, look, I'm interested in you beyond just a friendship. Like this was a riveting conversation, but I'm not looking for another friend. I've got too many
Go
friends.
ahead. I was going to say exactly what you said.
I
Go ahead.
I was like, I don't need any more friends. I probably have too many. I need to cut a few out, but I was like, I'm not
Such
looking
a
for any more
line.
friends. I'm interested in you for more than that. Yeah. And you just kind of like chuckled and were like, okay, and there wasn't any reciprocity. There was no like, yeah, man, I feel the same way. This is different. Today was different.
I really did feel like I was being obvious. I don't
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
so
you could use your words because you could have definitely said, this is different. Because I literally,
Yeah.
my head was a little messed up because I remember going back to my hotel and thinking like, is this how she rolls? Like, because like, she's obviously very charming, great communicator, beautiful, probably has guys all the time shooting their shot. So maybe she's just very polite. So I'm like kind of playing it back because I'm like, I really did put it out there. And if she felt the same way, it would have been very easy to go, yeah, this is not normal for me either. Didn't, right? So kept your cards very close to the vest. Apparently poured your heart out to your mom that night,
Sorry.
but left me twisting in the wind, which is fine. I'm not bitter. I
It
understand.
seems like you're really over
No,
it.
I'm just telling the people what happened. So anyway, I remember kind of twisting and turning all night, like kind of playing the day back, going like, maybe this is my chance to get my heart broken here. Like, I don't know, trying to kind of control myself a little bit in terms of my expectations. But reached out to you the next day. I was like, hey, you want to run it back? Let's go out again. And it was another great date. Mm-hmm.
And so, we could tell the whole story and that would take forever. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty much it. It was over. You had to go, so that was in the beginning of August, right? Mm-hmm. You had to go back to Texas to finish out your last year of school. I was back in Ohio, going to college there. And so our whole relationship was long distance. We never even lived in the same town until we were married and living in the same house, which is just bizarre. Don't recommend that for most people. It is an added level of difficulty.
Yeah.
But it was really fast. So we met in August. We got engaged the day before Thanksgiving in November, and then we got married in March.
It was an interesting dynamic because for us, the physical was removed, right? So like it's like the show Love is Blind, right?
I literally was going to.
Go ahead.
No,
go ahead,
go
girl.
for it.
Go ahead.
No. I love that's where you're going. Take it.
Well, it was like Love is Blind, but you do know what the person looks like, right? So like I did.
But that's it.
But that's it. Like you saw them a couple times, so you have an idea what they look like. So you know if that kind of is, if you're attracted to them. Or
there was no FaceTime. You weren't seeing each other all the time.
There was no FaceTime, and we weren't in the same place at the same time.
Yeah.
So it was all voice and conversation. So the couple months of conversation, which was daily, right? Eventually we cashed in the phone cards and bought cell phones and did the free mobile to mobile
family plan. Yeah, baby.
But those conversations with the physical taken out of it was where we really found out, do we connect on a mind and heart level?
Yeah.
And so that in some ways was agonizing because I wanted to, be in proximity to you, but it was a huge blessing because, it was the first time, really, honestly, I wanted to call someone on the phone. I wanted to talk like that. Like
neither one of us are phone callers.
No. But,
Text me.
yeah, but it was extremely helpful. I think it was foundational for us, and so
Yeah.
yeah.
I agree. I think that those conversations really were the reason that we were able to move that fast and still have it work. We had our difficulties the first year just because there was so much transition. You talk about like all the major stressors on a relationship or on a person. We had them all in the first year. Moved to a new town, both got new jobs, bought a house. My grandfather died the day before we got married. So you lose a loved one, like just thing after thing after thing. There was so much going on that I think added some extra pressure for us the first year. But I think the fact that we had such a deep relational connection beyond just a physical connection was really what was our saving grace and kept us solid.